11 months, one woman drained money from 14 different banks without stepping inside a single branch. September 14th, 2022, 7:42 a.m., Toronto, Canada. A pale blue server room hums in the early morning silence. Cold neon strips wash across rows of machines, each breathing a steady metallic vibration. An IT analyst jogs down the aisle, coffee still trembling in his hand, eyes fixed on a single red alert pulsing on the central monitor. He leans in. The screen updates again and again. 14 banking networks light up at the same exact second, each showing the same pattern of irregular withdrawals. No breach detected, no unauthorized login, no elevated permissions, just money slipping through the system. Clean, quiet, frictionless. Within 12 minutes, $11.7 million has vanished, not siphoned, not forcibly taken, just gone. Security reviews the logs. Nothing. Camera feeds, nothing. There's no face, no device, no presence. Not a single person physically touched any of the banks involved. For investigators, this isn't a cyber attack. It's an impossibility, a crime that shouldn't exist, because the digital trail doesn't begin and doesn't end anywhere. An analyst later described the moment he saw the pattern appear. It felt like someone reached into multiple vaults at once, without being in any of them. But the system can't explain how, and none of the banks can explain why they all fell the same way. A perfect pattern across 3 countries, carried out with a level of precision that suggests something far colder than luck and far smarter than chance. But what happened next changed everything. She was a woman in her early 30s, a quiet presence, someone who moved through the world without leaving a ripple. Neighbors later said the same thing. She kept to herself. She never caused trouble. No photos, no friends, no noise. She lived in a small 1-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. Dim hallway lights, a door that almost never opened. She worked alone and preferred it that way. No social media, no digital trail, not even a birthday post floating somewhere in the past. Her childhood sat on the opposite end of the spectrum, a cramped home, parents who juggled 2, sometimes 3 jobs just to stay afloat. Morning shifts, night shifts, missed dinners. She grew up watching people she loved drown in bills they didn't create and mistakes they didn't make. And she noticed things early. How a bank fee could push a family into debt. How an error could take weeks to fix. How power worked, quietly, against those who had none. By age 10, she had a mind that absorbed details with unnatural precision. Faces, tones, tiny shifts in someone's posture, a twitch at the corner of a mouth, the half-second pause before a lie. She read people the way others read signs on a highway.
Deception.
She remembered voices too, down to the rhythm of their breathing. A phrase repeated, a habit hidden inside the cadence. And because she grew up in the early 2000s, when home computers were becoming common, she learned technology the same way she learned people, quietly, patiently, by watching what others missed. But the fracture in her life didn't come from a childhood memory. It came much later. March 8th, 2019, 4:26 p.m., Vancouver, Canada.
How may I help you today?
A bank denied her a small personal loan. The reason wasn't dramatic. It was mechanical, a policy line, a checkbox, a number in a system she never influenced. And yet it decided everything. Weeks later, a supervisor at her job cornered her into taking responsibilities she never agreed to. No raise, no credit, just pressure. 2 different events, small on the surface, left a deeper wound than anyone realized. Not because she lost money, but because she lost trust. She began to see the financial world not as a structure, but as a machine, one that demanded obedience, but rarely offered protection. Her motive didn't grow from greed. It grew from a cold belief formed after years of watching the same cycle. Security is an illusion. People trust systems that were never designed for them. And once that idea took hold, once it settled into the quiet spaces of her mind, that's when she began to change. From 2020 to 2023, the financial world shifted into unfamiliar territory. Branches emptied, offices went dark, and tens of thousands of bank employees logged in from kitchens, bedrooms, and improvised home desks. Remote banking wasn't a trend. It was the only option. And with that shift came something institutions weren't prepared for: verification through a screen. Video calls replaced in-person checks. Rushed ID reviews replaced multi-step protocols. Employees worked under constant pressure, juggling quotas, delays, and the unease of a global crisis. By late 2021, several North American banks reported the same internal pattern: longer response times, more verification errors, and a spike in under-review cases. Human performance had become unpredictable, and criminals knew it. Inside these systems, the weakest point wasn't the software. It was the people operating it. Employees feared being flagged for slowing down transactions. They feared upsetting supervisors. They feared missing performance metrics. So when an email appeared from someone who looked, typed, and sounded like a senior manager, most didn't question it. They complied. Quickly, automatically. And video verification, something designed to improve security, became another pressure point. If a manager asked them to skip the extra step just this once, they often did. Stress has a way of rewriting judgment. Behind the scenes, the banks themselves carried their own fractures. Branches across different cities used slightly different procedures. Databases weren't fully synchronized. Customer information existed in separate silos that didn't communicate. Automation handled the majority of routine tasks, but oversight lagged behind. By 2022, more than 65% of mid-tier banks in North America relied on automated workflows with minimal human review. It created a paradox: strong firewalls, advanced fraud detection, multi-layer authentication, and yet an ecosystem stitched together with inconsistencies. 14 banks across 3 countries were considered untouchable. Different regulations, different infrastructures, different risk departments. No single criminal, in theory, could manipulate all of them. That was the belief. A belief built on protocol, not on reality. Because every fortress, no matter how advanced, no matter how fortified, has a crack. She spent 9 months preparing, not coding, not breaking into servers, but studying people, their routines, their pressure points, their blind spots. Preparation became a ritual, a dark room, a single lamp, a laptop with no history, and a wall of notes lit by the cold glow of a monitor. She started with what anyone could see. LinkedIn for titles and job roles, Facebook for habits, vacations, stress posts, late-night complaints, leaked corporate emails for writing style, the phrases supervisors repeated, the tone they used when rushing staff, and online meeting clips archived across public channels for one crucial detail: the voices, the rhythms, their hesitations, their accidental tells. By January 2022, she had a list of 42 employees across 4 regions. She never met them. She never contacted them. She never needed to. Instead, she built what investigators would later call the psychological grid: who cracked under stress, who feared authority, who followed instructions without asking, who acted fast in a crisis, who stalled, who apologized too much, who didn't ask questions, ever. It wasn't a database, it was a portrait of human behavior drawn with clinical precision. Her tools were simple, but chosen for one purpose: to mimic the edges of reality, not to break through them. A set of burner phones she cycled weekly, a laptop stripped of metadata, basic voice mimic software to replicate tone and cadence, light, low-resolution face overlays that passed casual checks in poor lighting, and a VPN chain that bounced through several countries, not for hacking, but for distance, for misdirection. Everything she used sat on the cinematic edge of technology, recognizable, but never technical enough to cross into something explicit. Testing followed: short, harmless calls to customer service lines, emails crafted to resemble routine internal messages, a few trial runs pretending to be a VIP client with an urgent request. Each experiment taught her something: who panicked, who complied, who hesitated, who never should be targeted again. By spring, a pattern emerged, and patterns were the only thing she trusted. Her life shrank with every passing week. Curtains closed, lights kept low, meals eaten without taste or memory. No friends, no conversations, no distractions. She lived like a shadow, studying other shadows, not out of malice, but out of obsession. She believed people were predictable. In predictable systems, even the largest financial ones could be bent without ever being touched. And in the final days of that 9-month descent, she reached a conclusion that terrified investigators later. It wasn't the technology she mastered, it was the human pattern behind it, a pattern she was now ready to exploit. And now, everything was ready. The first move came on a Thursday morning, January 13, 2022, 9:13 a.m. Calgary, Canada. A junior account officer logged in from his apartment kitchen. Cold light, a half-finished bowl of cereal, and a stack of overdue tickets blinking on his screen.
Yes.
His phone rang before he could take a breath. The voice on the line was calm, authoritative, measured. A perfect match to his branch director. The same rhythm, the same clipped tone used in meetings. "We have an urgent client situation. I need your help." He didn't question it. Not at 9:13 a.m., not when he was already behind. At 9:15, an internal email arrived. High priority, flagged urgent, formatted exactly like the ones his directors sent during quarterly reviews. Same sentence structure, same pressure between the lines. At 9:16, a video call appeared. 10 seconds, low resolution. A dim office behind the figure. Not enough time to study the face, just enough to confirm authority. Stress does something to judgment. It narrows it. It pushes instinct toward obedience. He didn't recheck the policy. He didn't request a second confirmation. He simply followed the instructions. By 9:20, he lifted the transaction limit for a VIP client experiencing temporary restrictions. A routine exception, a harmless accommodation. Or so it seemed. At 9:23, 3 small transactions passed through the system. Test amounts, unremarkable, invisible inside the morning noise. At 9:24, the real movement happened. A single transfer routed through a temporary holding account, flagged clean, processed instantly. No alerts, no warnings. And then the money was gone. Investigators later noted the timeline with a kind of unease. 11 minutes, no system breach, no anomaly, just human compliance. The pattern repeated across the next months, not carbon copies, variations built with meticulous care, different voices, different managers, different lighting in each fake call. Sometimes she spoke slowly with measured authority. Other times she rushed, mimicking the frantic tone of end-of-month deadlines.
Is the sincerest
she adjusted
form
to
of
time
flattery.
zones, called when fatigue was highest,
The operation
when
has
inboxes
begun.
were full, when employees were most likely to obey rather than question. Each approach relied on the same psychology. People don't follow systems. They follow pressure, tone, urgency, hierarchy. And she understood that better than anyone. There was no hacking, no forced entry, no broken firewalls, just human instinct, nudged in the right direction. She didn't exploit code. She exploited certainty, the assumption that authority always comes from above. And as her pattern expanded across provinces, then borders, then entirely different banking networks, she remained invisible.
You will be seeing me
A
soon.
voice, a shadow, a name that never existed inside any payroll system. But in the 12th operation, deep into her campaign, something shifted. A detail slipped, a hesitation appeared, and then the unexpected happened. It happened on the 12th operation. August 4th, 2022, 10:11 a.m., Seattle, Washington. A mid-level banking specialist sat at his home workstation, sunlight cutting through half-closed blinds. He had completed 6 back-to-back calls in under an hour. His stress level was measurable, heart rate elevated, shoulders tense,
We are awaiting
breathing
your final
shallow.
instructions.
Then her call came in. At first, everything followed the familiar rhythm. A supervisor's voice, a clipped instruction, a quick request. But this time, something faltered. A half-second delay in the face overlay, a tiny stutter in the audio, the kind of digital hiccup most people ignore, unless they're already on edge. He froze. For 4 seconds, he didn't speak, didn't type, didn't follow instructions. He stared at the screen and felt something off. Not enough to trigger alarm, but enough to break the automatic obedience she depended on. And in those 4 seconds, one thought crossed his mind. Should I verify this again? It was the closest anyone had ever come to unraveling her pattern. She saw the hesitation instantly, a pause in his breathing, a flicker of doubt in his eyes, the subtle shift that told her the illusion was thinning. Her reaction was immediate and cold. She cut the line, burner phone off, new device activated, VPN chain redirected across 3 continents. Every digital door she'd opened snapped shut in under a minute. From her perspective, that hesitation wasn't just a risk, it was a warning. A sign that human intuition, the very thing she exploited, could also become the thing that stopped her. Inside the bank, the employee reported the glitch. IT checked the call, reviewed the logs, found nothing but a brief connection issue, a bandwidth fluctuation, a momentary video missync, no red flags, no evidence of deception, no cause for escalation. The case was closed before it even began. She survived it because the system assumed innocence, because no one believed a threat existed behind a 10-second call. She slipped away again, untouched, untraced, unnoticed. Somehow, she survived the moment. By the end of her run, the numbers were no longer rumors. They were documented, measured, undeniable. 11 months, 14 banks, 3 countries, $11.7 million gone. Not drained through malware, not stolen through forced access, just redirected, cleanly, quietly, with almost surgical precision. International task forces formed in early 2023. Teams from Canada, the United States, and Singapore attempted to trace the activity. But they all hit the same wall. There was no fixed IP, no repeating device signature, no identifiable voice print, no stable metadata, no financial trail that lasted more than a few minutes before dissolving into unrelated nodes. Investigators described it as trying to follow footprints in a storm. Every clue washed away the moment they reached for it. And because there was no system breach, no unauthorized login, no forced override, prosecution became a maze with no entrance. The financial institutions had been manipulated, not penetrated. That distinction changed everything. As the case gained attention, a name surfaced online, a name whispered across cybersecurity forums and investigative circles. Ghost Weaver, the woman who stitched 14 institutions together without showing her face once. Media outlets called her the perfect criminal of the COVID era, not as praise, but as a reflection of the uncomfortable truth. Remote systems, rushed protocols, and human exhaustion created the opening no one predicted, and she walked straight through it, without ever being seen. But the investigation didn't close. Bank executives didn't relax, and law enforcement didn't stop watching the edges of the network, because even after the transfers ended, even after her digital presence evaporated, there were signs the story wasn't complete, but the story wasn't over. In the months that followed, investigators stumbled on details that made the case even stranger. A temporary wallet, one that had received part of the missing funds, flickered back to life for 0.8 seconds. No transaction, no login, just a momentary opening, then darkness again. Days later, an empty IP address pinged the network of bank hash 7 at 2:14 a.m., February 9th, 2023. No data attached, no payload, only a single request, as if someone tapped the door and walked away. Nothing in these signals proved she was still active. Nothing proved she was gone, either. And that uncertainty shaped the theories. Some investigators believed she was still out there, watching the perimeter of the system she once manipulated. Others thought she resurfaced only to test whether anyone was still looking for her. A few believed the opposite, that the brief signals weren't activity at all, but a message. A quiet reminder that the line between presence and absence is thinner than most people imagine. Because if a person can erase themselves from the digital world, do they still exist in the real one? No one has answered that. No one has seen her face. No one can say where she went after the 14th operation. Or maybe she vanished the moment we started looking.